The email arrives at 10:47 p.m. You are already in bed, one sock on, phone dimmed. The room doing that late-night blue thing where every object looks cheaper than it did in daylight. The subject line says your lease renewal is ready. Ready. As if this is something you ordered. You tap it anyway, because rent is one of those messages your body opens before your brain has finished deciding. The portal loads. Current rent, new rent, effective date. Sign here. The new number is $1,785. Last year it was $1,595. $190 more. Not a number big enough to make a dramatic story at work. Big enough to make your hand stop moving. For a few seconds, you only see the rent. Then the second calculation starts. The credit card payment you were finally getting under control. The emergency fund that had almost reached $2,000. The car repair you keep hearing before you can afford to fix it. The trip you already knew you might cancel. The dentist appointment in your calendar that suddenly looks negotiable. Nothing in the apartment moves. Same window that does not close all the way. Same stove with one burner that takes too long. Same little table where the mail piles up, but the room changes shape. The walls do not get closer. Your options do. That is the part people miss from the outside. They hear rent increase and imagine a budget. You feel it as geography. If you stay, the month gets tighter. If you leave, you need money to move. If you move farther out, your commute gets longer. If you move closer to work, the listings get worse. If you ask family for help, the conversation changes before the money does. A rent increase does not ask what else was already fragile. It simply arrives. Then everything around it has to rearrange. Your rent goes up, and your life gets smaller. Chapter 1. The first paycheck. Payday used to feel like a small reset. Not a celebration, just a reset. The checking account looked clean for a few hours. You would buy the groceries you actually wanted. You would pay a bill early and feel almost responsible. Sometimes you opened the savings app for no reason except to see a number that belonged to you. Then rent learned how to arrive before the money did. Not literally. The landlord still pulls it on the first. But emotionally, rent is already standing at the front of the line before the paycheck lands. The first Friday after the renewal, you get paid. $2,140 hits your account. For about 7 seconds, it looks like income. Then you open the calendar. Rent in 4 days. Utilities after that. Insurance, phone, groceries, the minimum payment on the card. The number stops feeling like money and starts feeling like a train passing through a station. It arrives. It pauses. It leaves. You are there mainly to watch the doors open and close. $190 a month sounds survivable. That is why it works. It is not enough to force one clean decision. It is enough to make 12 smaller ones. No takeout this week. Generic groceries. Wait on the oil change. Skip the birthday dinner. Leave the emergency fund where it is. Tell yourself next month will be normal. The money does not come from some obvious luxury. It comes from the soft parts. The parts of your life that make the month feel less like a hallway. That is the first rule. Rent does not have to ruin you to control you. It only has to arrive first. Once the largest bill claims the month, every other decision becomes a negotiation with what is left. You stop asking what you want the month to be. You ask what can survive after the first. Chapter 2. The line. There is a number people repeat when they want housing to sound simple. 30%. Do not spend more than 30% of your income on housing. It sounds like a rule your life should be able to obey. So you test it. You open a listing site at lunch. Studio. Over the line. 1 bedroom. Over the line. Cheaper place, farther away. The rent goes down and the commute eats the difference. Another place looks possible until the fees show up after the tour. Application fee. Admin fee. Parking fee. Pet rent for a dog that already lives with you as if the dog has acquired a second job. This is where your private math becomes a national room. Harvard's 2026 rental housing report found that 22.7 million renter households spent more than 30% of income on rent and utilities in 2024. About 49% of all renters. Almost half. That number is too large to be explained by a few people choosing badly. You feel that when you scroll. The cheap listings are not secretly waiting on page 6. The market does not pause and say, sorry, the rule says this should be affordable. It just keeps showing you rooms that require a version of your paycheck you do not have. After a while, the percentage becomes a personality. You become careful. You become quiet. You become the person who checks the menu before saying yes, the person who says maybe next month, the person who keeps a running total in the grocery aisle without meaning to. You can still smile. You can still go to work. You can still make the rent. But some part of you is always sitting at that little table with the portal open, trying to make the rest of the life fit under the new number. That is the second rule. Affordable does not mean the payment clears. Affordable means the life around the payment still has room to happen. Chapter 3. The Application Maze. From far away, the answer sounds clean. Move. Find a cheaper place. Be flexible. Start fresh. People say this with the confidence of someone who has not priced a moving truck recently. You try anyway. Saturday morning, coffee on the table, laptop open, 6 tabs. One apartment looks possible. Not good. Possible. Then you start counting the cost of asking for it. Application fee, background check, credit check, security deposit, first month, maybe last month, utility setup, boxes, truck, a day off work you may not be paid for. By the time the cheaper apartment becomes reachable, it has a toll booth in front of it. Then comes the part that feels less like shopping and more like being inspected. The landlord wants proof, income, credit, rental history, employment verification, old eviction records, even when the story behind them was messier than the record makes it look. Maybe a tenant screening score you will never see. Before you stand in the apartment, a file stands there for you. A file with your past flattened into risk. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes with a bigger deposit. Yes with a cosigner. Yes if you can prove more than the person whose paper is cleaner. That is the third rule. In renting, leaving can cost money before it saves any. Staying gets more expensive. Moving asks for cash up front, and the cheaper door may still ask you to explain yourself before it opens. Chapter 4. The Invisible Landlord. People still talk about landlords like they are always one person with keys, someone nearby, someone who knows the building, someone you can catch in the hallway and explain the leak to. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes the person raising the rent is a portal, a leasing office, a property manager, a company with a friendly neighborhood name and a spreadsheet behind it. You submit a maintenance ticket. You receive a number. You ask about the fee. You receive a policy. You explain that the increase is hard. The portal reminds you that your renewal options expire Friday. This is where the rent number starts to blur. The listing says one price. The monthly bill says another. Trash, pest control, technology, package locker, parking, convenience fee for paying through the only system they gave you. Each charge is small enough to make you feel petty for noticing. Together, they change the cost of staying. The Federal Trade Commission has been looking at rental housing fees because the advertised price and the live price can become two different things. You do not need a policy paper to feel that. You feel it when the total at the bottom of the portal is higher than the number that got you to tour the apartment. That is the fourth rule. The larger the landlord system becomes, the smaller your individual story can feel. Your job change, your child's school, your sick parent, your broken heater, your renewal. To you, these are events. To the system, they are tickets, terms, dates, and margins. Not a cartoon villain. Something colder. An answer that does not have to hate you to be expensive. Chapter 5. The Moving Door. Maybe you're not trying to rent forever. Maybe you have a number written somewhere. 10,000, 25,000. Enough for a down payment, closing costs, moving costs, and the mysterious extra cushion every adult seems to need before a bank takes them seriously. You save in small amounts. 200 here, 75 there. A tax refund you promise not to touch. Then rent goes up. The target on the page does not change. Your speed does. The door is still there. It is just farther away than it was last month. This is why homeownership can start to feel less like a milestone and more like a train that keeps leaving earlier than you arrive. In 2025, the National Association of Realtors said first-time buyers were only 21% of recent buyers in its survey. and the median first-time buyer age had climbed to 40. You read that number and think about your own savings account. 40. Not because everyone forgot how to grow up, because rent, deposits, student loans, car payments, childcare, insurance, and local prices all pull on the same paycheck. Meanwhile, someone who already owns may be playing a different game. Repairs happen, taxes happen, insurance happens. Ownership is not magic, but part of the payment can build equity. Your rent resets to 0 every month. Same roof, different direction. That is the fifth rule. The person trying to leave the rent cycle has to pay the rent cycle while building the exit. Every increase asks the same quiet question. How much future can you still afford to keep? Chapter 6. The other side of the check. Every month, the rent leaves your account. For you, it is subtraction. For someone else, it may be income, mortgage coverage, cash flow, debt service, a return on an asset, a line in a portfolio. That doesn't make every owner rich. Vacancies are real. Repairs are real. Bad tenants are real. Insurance and taxes can turn a good-looking property into a headache. But the category is different. One side pays for access. The other side may build ownership from that access. That is why rent becomes a class story. The same apartment can be shelter to one person and an asset to another. The same monthly payment can feel like survival on one side and strategy on the other. The same renewal email can mean fewer groceries for the tenant and better yield for the owner. No speech is required. The structure says it quietly enough. Once you see which side of the check you're standing on, the portal looks different. It is no longer just asking whether you will renew. It is asking how long you can keep paying for access while someone else owns the door. So you go back to the renewal. Sign now, decline, contact office. 3 buttons pretending this is a simple decision. Behind them is your commute, your friends, your child's school, the grocery store you know, the little emergency fund, the future house that keeps moving farther away, the fear that if you leave this room, the next room may cost even more to enter. You don't sign right away. You put the phone face down. The apartment is quiet again. Same walls, same stove, same window. But now you know what changed. Rent raised more than the price of the room. It redrew the map around it, where you can work, who you can live near, how quickly you can leave, how much future you can build while staying housed in the present. From the outside, it still looks like one line item, rent. From the inside, it can feel like the bill that decides how much of your life gets to stay.